dangerous situation.
And of course, SpaceX, one of the companies that uses Cape Canaveral out there for launching rockets, and SpaceX does a lot of work with testing its rockets. If you remember back in 2014, SpaceX has a rocket testing facility in McGregor, Texas. That's in Central Texas. They had an accident there where somebody was killed when they were doing a test out there. So these companies do a lot of tests because what you're dealing with here is not just very complicated systems. There's a tremendous amount of fuel. We are working to get, of course, Melanie Holt, our Brevard County reporter, on the phone for a little bit more information. But again, what we're hearing from eyewitnesses, a giant flash of light. You're seeing a ball of fire, and then all of this smoke now rising out of Cape Canaveral.
And we do have some potentially good news out of this. We just got another update from a KSC employee saying that the pad was clear when this explosion happened, though we're not sure yet if anyone was injured because there were multiple explosions, we're being told, lasting for several minutes. So you can imagine this was a fluid situation, and first responders are obviously still on the way to the scene to help put out that fire. You can see that large plume of smoke that we've been showing you now live here on Channel 9.
Visible from miles away. We have eyewitness Mike on the phone. And Mike, you were driving in on the 528. You saw the flash of light. Tell me what you saw out there.
Just on 528, as we pull into Port Canaveral, there was a flames that was about 4 stories high, and then the billow of smoke around it. The flames seemed to subside almost immediately, but the flames were huge.
Tell me about seeing that. I mean, I got to imagine the moment you see a flash like that, it takes your attention. But I mean, this had to just startle you and also kind of raise a lot of concern.
It was, of course, an immediate concern. Again, to see the launches on a continuous basis, to see the flashes like that and the fire, it was almost as if the shuttle was going up.
Really?
As far as the billow.
Now, what does the smoke look like? Can you see it from your vantage point right now? We're seeing some still photos of the smoke. It looks like it's drifting kind of to the north. Are you still seeing that large plume of black smoke?
It is going to the north just due to the winds out here at the port are really blowing with the storm coming through.
Mike, appreciate
it. It's blowing away from Port Canaveral.
Mike, appreciate the call, appreciate the information. Thank you very much.
And we now have Channel 9's Melanie Holt, our Brevard County Bureau Chief, is now at the scene. And Mel, what can you tell us, what you've learned so far?
I can tell you that we're just outside the gates of Cape Canaveral Airport Station right now, where I can see a large plume of smoke. From what we've been able to gather at this point, it was some type of explosion at Complex 40. Now, that is the area of SpaceX. We are trying to confirm with them exactly what has happened at this point, but also have heard that there was a hot fire test of their rocket today, and this explosion may have happened prior to that. We are reaching out to SpaceX to try to determine exactly what may have happened at this point, but have not heard back as of yet.
And Melanie, have you seen first responders? Have they been able to get on the scene yet?
I have not. You must keep in mind that this is a restricted area. So we are right now outside of the gates, and what you can see is a large plume of smoke, which is probably visible from miles around. We also got text earlier today that folks actually could feel this explosion. In other words, their houses shook as this happened.
And from where you can see, Melanie, do you know if the fire is out? I mean, are we still just seeing residual smoke here, or are there still active flames shooting up in the air?
From where I am, and please keep in mind that is a great distance, so I'm not seeing any fire. What I'm seeing is smoke from this vantage point. But obviously, at this point, we're reaching out to those folks that are there closer on scene in this restricted area to find out exactly what's going on at this moment.
And Mel, you've covered a number of these launches. You probably know them better than almost anybody in the newsroom. Talk about the testing and the preparation that goes into these SpaceX launches days in advance. We're understanding that that's what they were doing this morning, some routine testing.
Obviously, they have to make sure that all the mechanisms on this rocket are ready for launch. They make space look easy sometimes. We take for granted all of the preparation that needs to go into launches like this one, because when they're successful, we think, well, maybe space is easy, and it isn't. So obviously, they have a lot of testing to do before any of these rockets are prepared for launch. And keep in mind that they also have some very extensive payloads. So a lot of careful consideration goes into all of this. Now, again, we're not sure exactly what happened today, if they had started testing or this was prior to the testing at this point. but those are details that we're working on getting right now.
Okay. And Melanie, we're going to actually show a map of where this is so we can give people a better idea. I think most of our viewers are familiar with the Kennedy Space Center, but if we can pop up that map and show you, this is the area where we're seeing this large plume of smoke come from. And we're going to let Melanie Holt work the scene there and try to get some more information. We actually have another witness on the phone who felt their house shake all the way in Titusville. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just tell us what happened at your home there this morning.
Well, sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden the whole building shook like a big explosion. A friend, my other neighbor, called me, and we went outside, and a big plume of smoke. And then there was a second explosion. You can actually see the ball of fire. And then watching it, there was a third explosion where another plume of smoke went up in the air.
Jim, if you could compare this to launches that you've experienced out there as far as the intensity of both the vibrations and then the intensity of kind of the sound, the concussion from the blast that you heard there at your home.
It was like a sonic boom. That's the best way to explain it.
When you have seen launches in the past, very similar to that, or was this somewhat, was it stronger than that?
No, this is a definite explosion, like, a big boom, and it just shook.
And how long did your house shake? We're hearing that there were multiple explosions. I know you said that you felt at least 2.
Well, there was actually 3. The second one wasn't as loud. The third one was even smaller. But the first one that got my attention was, it shook everything. It was just a big boom, and it was over with. It was an explosion.
And this is, of course, what we're seeing there. We have the picture of this is actually happening out at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. This is where the Falcon 9 is at, and what we're starting to get in is we're getting reports that the rocket was out there. This was a test. They were trying to test a couple of things before launching it, presumably on Saturday, and they had this explosion. If you would, real quick, tell me about what you said. It felt like a sonic boom. Startling, that is, when it comes across and it hits. Then you see kind of the smoke and everything. The level of concern when you saw that out your window and you see kind of what's going on out there at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
Well, I tell you what, it's just, you knew something was wrong. That's why I called you guys.
And we have some new live pictures we can show you right now here on Channel 9. These are from our crew on the ground, and you can see that smoke plume still very large out here at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. This is from Melanie Holt and her photographer on the ground. They are working to gather more information. Here's what we know so far. This all happening within the last half hour or so. NASA saying several explosions were at the SpaceX site here that we're so familiar seeing launches from. There was set to be a SpaceX launch on Saturday at 3 a.m. And that's when they were out here doing preparations for this shot. And
one of the things you need to remember, if you're not intimately familiar with this section of Cape Canaveral and the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, what you've got is basically a natural area to the west. You have the intercoastal there, and then out, of course, to the east, you have nothing but the Atlantic Ocean. And this was designed really on purpose because what you have out there is you don't have large population centers, and you are away from population. So if there is an accident, if there is an explosion, if there's something like what we're seeing unfold this morning, what you've done is you've minimized any possible, collateral damage. And so what we're hearing is we're starting to hear that this was a test. They're testing the rocket. They're making sure everything's kind of good to go, assuming that the tropical storm pushes through, weather clears, and they can finally launch on Saturday morning. And then you now have a test. Something apparently has gone wrong. There's an explosion. There's a large plume of smoke. But again, so far away from any population center that this really, if there is any kind of, mitigating circumstances, what you have there is the natural barriers of both the water and the natural areas that are really preventing this from being anything more major.
And what we've heard so far from some employees on the ground, and you can see in the distance there's some vehicles moving through the scene there, that the launch pad was apparently cleared of any people when this happened. But of course, we don't know if there are any injuries yet. That's one thing that we're working very diligently to find out. We know that there were several explosions in a row that went on for several minutes. And obviously we're hearing from people as far as several miles away that felt this explosion rock their homes. So that's something that a lot of people are startled by, of course.
And if you're just joining us, we've been on the air for about 10 minutes here. About 9:15 this morning, there were reports. We immediately started getting them into the newsroom. I actually had a good friend of mine call me because he had seen it as he was driving to work. There was an explosion, a ball of fire. People felt their homes shake, and then moments later, you start to see these dark smoke start to rise out of Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Shortly thereafter, and I'm kind of catching everybody up if you're just joining us now, what we started to find out, this is a SpaceX facility. The Falcon 9 rocket was sitting there waiting to do a launch on Saturday morning, waiting for the weather to clear.
Doing routine testing, getting ready for that launch.
Getting everything kind of set up for what was going to be an expected launch to send a satellite up into orbit. And now all of a sudden we have a rocket that has exploded. We have smoke still rising from this facility, people being kept pretty far away. And you're starting now to kind of find out a little bit more about what led up to this. So far, and I want to reiterate this because I don't know that we've hammered this point home enough, we have received no reports of any injuries. This would be consistent with them doing a test and having everyone far away from the rocket, which has, if you're preparing it for a launch, is going to be filled with fuel. So you have everyone away. We've had no reports of any injuries. So right now, basically what we're looking at is an explosion, smoke continuing to rise from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
And it seems like in the last few minutes that the smoke plume is actually starting to go down slightly. That's just from my observation here, watching this picture that we've had on the air now for about 10 or 15 minutes. Melanie Holt is there on the ground working to get more information from her sources. Again, we have heard of no injuries. That's one thing you said, Chris. That is a good point to make. All things considered, this is something that they prepare for. And as Mel was saying, they make space exploration look easy. We haven't had any major incidents in recent memory that we can compare to this. So this looks like it happened, if it were going to happen, at the right time during a test.
And we continue to get different information, and this is a live stream from Kennedy Space Center. You're looking out there, and you can kind of see what would be, that's launch pad 40 right there, where you're seeing all that smoke come. And I'm being told we have Pam on the phone from Brevard County. And Pam, what did you see and what did you hear this morning about 9:15 when this all happened?
I was clothes out of the washer, and it shook my whole backside of my house.
And you're all the way in Palm Bay. Can you tell us just how far it would be from where this explosion actually happened?
I'm probably about a good 7.5, maybe 8 miles from Cape Canaveral.
Okay. We spoke to another viewer who called us as well, and we appreciate you guys taking the time to do that, who said that he heard multiple explosions. We're hearing from NASA officials that there were multiple explosions, and it was almost like several sonic booms over and over. Did you feel more than one in your home?
I've heard the first loud one. It was really loud, and I thought it was maybe the weather. And I came out of the bathroom, and then I felt the other one, but I didn't feel the third one as much as I first felt the first two.
When you say you heard several explosions and you kind of felt them, I know living out there in Brevard County, you get used to, we know we've got a launch coming up, and you kind of get used to the fact that there's going to be a launch. Tell me about the moment you realized this does not feel like a launch happening.
No, this is kind of like almost an earthquake.
Almost like an earthquake. So just a sudden blast, and then you feel the whole house shake. When you started to realize something had happened, I mean, tell me about the concern and then trying to figure out, what exactly just happened.
Exactly, because I came out here and I have an entertainment center and I have a bunch of stuff on top of it, and it was all on the floor.
Wow, so the impact was that great at your home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Pam, thank you very much. Stay safe out there. What we're starting to now hear is that there are starting to be some evacuations in the area. They're concerned about some of this smoke, toxic smoke now kind of rising out from where the rocket exploded. And something to keep in mind, traditionally, a rocket takes off, you're going to burn your fuel during the launch. There's a burn initially, and then it continues, and then there's a second stage, and you continue on as you are trying to break Earth's orbit. An explosion like this, if it does play out the way that we're being told from about 3 different eyewitnesses and people that were near it happened, what you would have is all of that fuel essentially go up in pretty quick succession, all in one place, as opposed to the rocket lifting off and that fuel then being burned as the rocket is leaving from Launch Pad 40. It all goes up in one place right here, which is why now we're seeing all this fire, we're seeing all the smoke, we're seeing the concern over the toxic smoke coming out.
And we want to show you that map again of where this is all happening. You can see the smoke actually showing up on Severe Weather Center 9's radar there. You can see that it looks almost like the storms that we've been watching over the last few days. That huge smoke plume we've been showing you now here live on the air. And as Chris was talking about earlier, this is kind of set up by design to be in this area where there are very few people around. So the people who are calling us, telling us that they're feeling the explosions and things, they're several miles away. And what we know so far is that from an employee on site, the launch pad was clear. So we have not been able to confirm any injuries at this time. We haven't heard of anything like that happening. We also have a tweet from one of our reporters, Shannon Butler, who just found out at least 2 explosions there have forced people to evacuate as far away as they can. They're worried about toxic air, something you were just talking about, Chris.
Yeah, and getting back to this idea of if you all of a sudden have all that fuel go up in a matter of seconds right there on the launch pad, it doesn't have the chance to be burned off during launch. It doesn't have the chance to be burned off as the rocket is going out over the Atlantic Ocean. And so now all of a sudden you have it all burning in one specific spot. It's going to burn very hot, and it's going to burn all this smoke up into the air for quite a time.
And now we have Channel 9's Melanie Holt, who is live on the scene. She gave us our first report about 10 minutes ago. And Mel, you've got your camera up now. I know that you're keeping that live picture up, but tell us what you're hearing from your sources so far.
Well, we're just keeping an eye on things out here, and I can tell you that we do have a little information from Brevard County Emergency Management. They basically say there's no threat to the general public from what they're now describing as a catastrophic abort during static test fire at the SpaceX launch pad at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station this morning. Now, NASA has no direct information related to this incident because, again, it was Capeside. Incident happened right around 9 a.m. this morning, but they tell us that Kennedy Space Center emergency operations personnel are monitoring the situation and standing by to assist if required. Obviously, it doesn't appear that that has happened yet, but Kennedy is also just monitoring the air conditions, which you were talking about a moment ago, just making sure the area is safe for all of those who are employed nearby at the Kennedy Space Center.
We are back now, and Greg Wormuth is here now. And Greg, you have a lot of experience with the space program and everything that's happening out there. Kind of talk about how rare this is to have something like this happen during a test.
We have seen this before. We have seen, of course, when the Kennedy Space Center was doing these liftoffs, we have seen rockets explode. We have seen this sort of plume of smoke before, and we've seen the precautions that Channel 9's Melanie Holt was talking about. Because what happens here is the smoke and the toxic fume, then that becomes something where people are told to shelter in place. We're hearing some of those ideas. And in terms of air conditioning and things like that, with this possibly coming into the house, this is the concern at this point. In terms of injuries on the launch pad, we have not heard of any. This was a test. It was not populated by a lot of people. Of course, the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station is far out really from any main populated areas. So the smoke is what we're going to monitor right now. The way the wind is blowing as well is something that Channel 9's Brian Shields is watching. So as we watch the smoke plume, that is a factor, the way that the wind is blowing. We see smoke on radar right now, and in terms of the wind direction, it looks as though to me that a lot of this smoke is now coming towards the populated areas, Carla.
And we just got an update from Brevard County's Emergency Operations Center. They say that this air is not a threat. Of course, that's something that viewers would think about when they see a large plume of smoke like this. So far, officially, Brevard County is saying this air is not a threat. And you're taking a look at a picture that was taken, I guess, moments after that explosion. You can see some of the orange flames in that picture. And we have been showing you live pictures of this all morning. If we want to take some of those live pictures of the smoke, this is from a contractor out at the Kennedy Space Center.
There's a live look right now from NASA's camera, so you can see that smoke still billowing there. Smoke near Cape Canaveral. Again, the news is concerning for those who see a black plume of smoke heading in their direction on this cloudy day. But again, we're now hearing from officials that it is not something in terms of inhaling that is of concern. So we're monitoring that situation as well. Channel 9's Christopher Heath, who was in this chair moments ago, is now working his sources. And also, this is obviously a major story. He is not alone. We have Mel Holt, a lot of eyewitnesses calling as well. And Eyewitness News has also sent over its helicopter. So within a few minutes, Carla, we will have Sky Witness 9 over the scene to give us even a better picture, an aerial view of what you're looking at right now. Sky Witness just arrived on the scene. We're establishing that signal, that picture. We'll bring that to you in just a moment. But just to recap a little bit, and here's a live look from Sky Witness 9. This as it heads over the Intercoastal Waterway, heading over to the Brevard County, Cape Canaveral area as it flies over. And you can see off in the distance on the horizon, again, it's a cloudy day, not a perfectly clear day, but there you see, Carla, see the plume of smoke right at the horizon there as the camera adjusts, and the way that it is wafting appears to be wafting, and I know Brian Shields is on microphone as well. Brian, it looks to me as though that smoke cloud, which again we're hearing is not toxic, is blowing perpendicular with the coast. And as we zoom in now, there's a better look. If you could describe the wind direction and what people are seeing, because right now there is no doubt that if you live in Brevard County and you've heard of these sorts of things, that one of the concerns is, am I inhaling something if I'm somebody that's asthmatic or have breathing issues? But there's a look at the smoke, Brian.
And Greg, what we're seeing here is again that tropical system off to the west. The winds have been rather light for the most part, and a lot of that smoke is kind of drifting. The winds are out of the southwest right now, drifting that smoke, and a lot of it's going across water, not land, either over the Atlantic open waters or just to the north of there, Greg, is a Mosquito Lagoon. So north of Merritt Island, north of Dummit Grove, a lot of that smoke has been going right over the water, not over the land areas based on the current winds.
Another live look right now. This explosion happened at a little after 9 o'clock this morning. Carla Ray has been on the air since just about the first reports came in, and now we're at 9:53, getting a better look right now because Sky Witness 9 has arrived on the scene. And there it looks as though you were looking at the actual structure where that test was going on. This was a test with SpaceX, which is a privately owned rocket that ultimately its goal is to return manned space flights to the United States. For so long, since the retirement of the space shuttle, we have relied on other agencies, namely Russia, to get our astronauts into space. But now with SpaceX, and this clearly a setback, although these sorts of setbacks happen, this is a test firing, and with a launch scheduled for Saturday morning at 3, obviously that has been hampered by this.
And one thing that we have been told from an employee on scene, again, we want to keep reiterating that the launch pad was clear of people. We do have someone from Brevard EOC on the phone right now to give us an update. What can you tell us as far as an emergency operations standpoint at this?
Well, I mean, we've been alerted that there was an incident at the launch pad, and we've sent out information based on what we've been able to get from Kennedy Space Center and from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, that there's no threat to the general public. From what we understand was a catastrophic abort during a static test fire at the SpaceX launch pad.
Sir, as you look at some of the images, you can understand, as a member of the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center, Mr. Walker, there is concern because we have had explosions in the past, and people are obviously leery of smoke, especially if they're asthmatic, have breathing issues, have kids, because, there's the fear that this may be toxic, but you're saying it is not.
We have been told that there's no threat to the general public, so that's, Kennedy Space Center is investigating this incident. And as far as the county itself, we have not been requested to assist in their response.
We had heard from some people on the ground there that there were some evacuations happening. Are you evacuating any residents out who are in the area of this smoke plume?
There are no evacuations.
Again, Mr. Walker, Don Walker, Brevard County EOC, as it relates also, we were dealing with, the possibility of storms here. So talk about how your situation is in terms of being manned, and when you got the first call in, what sort of readiness did you all go into?
I know this is live, but I couldn't understand your question.
With everything going on with the pending tropical storm and those types of preparations, and now this, how are you manned? How's your staffing? How are you prepared to deal with something like this?
Well, I mean, we're just, if if there was an incident that we needed to activate, we would call in the essential personnel that would be needed to do a response. But since we have not been contacted to do so, we're just monitoring what's going on there, and just like we're also monitoring what's going on with the storm system and the tropical storm up in the Panhandle.
All right, thank you again, Don Walker, for spending a few moments with us, Emergency Operations Center. He has been told to instruct those who are concerned that the smoke is not an issue. Let's take a look at some tweets, as we also have Sky Witness 9 over the scene. This from Martha Segalski, video right after the explosion at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And again, these images continue to come to us, and really social media, Carla, has been our friend whenever it comes to breaking news. That's the difference between covering space programs and other disasters in the past as to how we cover them now.
And we have a lot of crews working to get information on this. This is from our reporter Shannon Butler, who is talking about a staging area for employees to get a head count, trying to see who's accounted for. That's something obviously that's routine in anything like this. Again, we have no reports of injuries at this time. Again, another tweet from Shannon here. People inside the building say it sounded like a car fell on top of the building. We've had other people call in and tell us it felt like several sonic booms, but not the normal sonic booms. You know, people in Brevard County are used to hearing sonic booms, but nothing like this.
Live look right now from the NASA camera. You still see smoke billowing from the SpaceX where the test firing was happening at 9. Let's go into Brevard County live on the scene with Channel 9's Brevard County Bureau reporter, who has covered all sorts of launches and landings, and that is Channel 9's Melanie Holt. Mel, from your vantage point, what are you seeing, what are you hearing, and really, what are you smelling?
I'm not smelling much, but I can tell you there's a pretty strong breeze from where we're set up outside of the gates of Cape Canaveral Air Force Station right now. But if you look at these pictures, you will notice that we see the smoke appears to be dissipating at this point. I mean, when you were here just a few minutes ago, you could see that plume of very dark smoke, and it appears to be much lighter now. We hope that means that possibly they're just getting a greater handle on this situation at this point. We did reach out to SpaceX, as I mentioned earlier, and are still waiting to hear back from them about exactly what the situation is out there on the pad. But from this vantage point, we can tell you we know that this obviously happened during an abort of a test fire for SpaceX's rocket, but there is a facility, a building where those rockets would be processed. And as far as we can tell from this vantage point, it appears that that building is intact. So that is at least good news. You know, the question that we have, today for SpaceX and from where we are today is whether or not there was significant or catastrophic damage to that launch pad, because that could be a major setback if that has happened, and could obviously delay a number of SpaceX's commercial launches here from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. So that is a question we will have to get an answer to today.
Melanie Holt reporting. Melanie, let's talk about what you've seen there in the past. You have seen and heard explosions. This was an unmanned rocket. Mel, we've seen the fear of people who live in Brevard County when the plume of an exploded rocket comes towards their neighborhood. But what we're hearing now is that there is no concern.
No, there appears to be no threat to the general public at this point. Obviously, we see the smoke dissipating at this point, and there is a reason that these launches happen as far out as they do in areas like Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center. You can see there's not much around these areas. There's basically a zone here when there's an actual launch where folks aren't even allowed in the area of the launch. That can actually cause an abort of a mission. But here, again, this was not a launch. This was a static test fire. We still don't know what exactly may have happened, but that information will have to come from SpaceX later today.
Melanie Holt, again, continued to work her sources and giving us the latest on a SpaceX explosion. Thank you very much. We'll rejoin you in a moment. I want to also welcome onto the set Channel 9's Vanessa Eccles. Vanessa Eccles is just in. We have, of course, both been here for decades and seen these sorts of things before. The good news when it comes to this, although this obviously is big news when you have a major explosion on a launch pad, this was taking a satellite into space on Saturday was the schedule to take a Facebook satellite. Vanessa Eccles is with me. Your first reaction? You live on the east side of town. I imagine when you left for work today, you saw the black smoke, or maybe at least could see something in the distance.
Could see something faint and kind of wondering like what in the world that was. But again, interesting that Mel mentioned that this was a static test fire, not an actual launch. The launch was set to happen Saturday morning, I think around 3 o'clock Saturday morning.
Here's a live look again, smoke at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And what we see there is that this test fire, this engine, Vanessa, still smoldering there. I think when you look at this too, you're wondering, okay, there has to be workers that are close by. We are getting no reports into the newsroom that there were any injuries because this was done again in a very distant area. It was a test firing of a massive rocket engine. And again, let's take a look at some pictures from the scene as we continue to go from some of our viewers. We are getting all kinds of tweets in. We're getting Facebook posts, and we want to take a look at some of those as well. And again, as SpaceX, we're waiting to also hear from Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX, for a comment from him. And here's a really, really vivid picture. Moments after the explosion, you see the ball of fire and that thick black smoke.
And then we were also getting a call from someone in the Palm Bay area saying that they were seeing smoke as far away as Palm Bay as well, and said that they felt something early this morning as well.
All right, so there you go. There's another good look. Sky Witness 9 is over the scene, giving us some pretty good imagery right there. It's a hazy day, so not one of the most picture-perfect days to see the smoke. But as Brian Shields said, because of the tropical system that we're dealing with right now, the explosion at SpaceX and the smoke that is there is really running perpendicular with the coast and not wafting necessarily over top of the viewers.
In fact, we have one of our employees now, one of our photographers, Dave Ader, in Sky Witness 9. So, Dave, tell us a little bit about what you saw approaching the scene and what you see right now.
Well, Greg and Vanessa, we left Orlando probably over about half an hour, 45 minutes ago, and as soon as we lifted off from Executive Airport, we could see the plume of smoke from Orlando. And here is the scene right now at the Kennedy Space Center on the launch pad. And as I zoom out, to kind of give you a scene setter of kind of where this is, if I pan out, zoom out just a little bit further, you'll be able to see the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center at the bottom left hand of your screen. That's kind of the Visitor Center. And as I zoom out a little bit more, you'll be able to see the vehicle assembly building kind of off to the left over there. And so that's kind of out near the coast. The smoke, like Brian said, seems to be going straight north. We have seen it die down incredibly since we arrived on scene and since we first saw it as we left Orlando. But the smoke has died down a lot since we left Orlando. But as I zoom back in, you can see the scene on the launch pad. It's hard to make out exactly what is on that structure, but there is a structure there, and it looks like the structure has been affected. Can't tell to the extent right now, but it is still smoke coming down from the bottom of the structure, and the plume is continuing to go north, but at a much lesser rate than it was earlier. Greg, Vanessa?
Hey, Dave, from your vantage point, and I know that this area is remote in terms of the population of Brevard County, but as you were flying over, we obviously know that this is a populated area just adjacent, just to the west of this. Did you see any roads closed, anything like that? Anybody being directed off the roads that lead to the Kennedy Space Center or Cape Canaveral Air Force Station?
No, we did not, Greg. We did not see any kind of deputies or FHP, anyone blocking any streets off. There are a few residences down here below us where we are now, but it is a great distance from the site, and the smoke is going north. These residents are a little bit south of the actual site of the explosion.
All right, Dave. Again, Dave Ader, live in Sky Witness 9 for us. Again, another look at that structure that he talked about. It does appear to have been damaged by that explosion. You can see that it has a bend to the left in it, and it does appear as though there was some significant damage there. And still, where that test fire happened, the static test fire, in other words, a test fire on the ground for a rocket launch that was supposed to happen on Saturday overnight, Sunday morning, 3 a.m. That likely will not happen now, of course. And what was going to be on board that particular launch was Facebook's first satellite. It was a satellite that Mark Zuckerberg was launching to give Facebook to other parts of the world that don't currently have the internet.
Take a look at this. This is some video we have. This were people who were at the Kennedy Space Center watching. They were there for some reason, but this is what they were seeing as well. And there you can see that thick black smoke. Interesting, when Dave talked a minute ago, he said that when they lifted off in Sky Witness 9 in downtown Orlando, as soon as they lifted off, they could see it.
Yeah, and that's the horizon. When you have watched other rocket launches, whether it's the space shuttle or whatever, we typically get a pretty good view from downtown Orlando, but there's a great view. These folks were there. You know, you want to feel the engine. The test launch was not a secret. They knew, when I say test launch, the static fire was not a secret, so they want to feel that energy. And it is, depending on the day, you know, you can feel the reverberation coming across the waterway. So those folks that provided that YouTube video. We're also hearing on social media all sorts of reports. One person saying their sliding glass doors were blown off the tracks. One person thought that their house was struck by lightning. One person telling us that they actually had things knocked off the shelving. So imagine you're going through your day, your regular day, whether you're in school or at home or moving about town, and you feel this explosion in the times that we're in right now. It has to be unnerving to have an explosion that will knock a sliding glass door off its tracks. And there are no houses that are right next to this. That will tell you the force of this explosion. Now, you typically, if you live in Brevard County, you've heard things lift off before, but you know when something is wrong.
Exactly.
And today it was clear something was wrong.
In fact, someone we see on Twitter said it rattled the windows, and that person said, at first I thought it was a sonic boom.
Yeah, and sonic booms, we hear those on occasion, whether it's, you know, the re-entry. It's interesting, SpaceX actually has sonic booms now. We think of the sonic boom, Vanessa, when we think of the space shuttle, when it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. But SpaceX, because of the way these rockets lift off and then come back and land so that they can reuse, they're using the reusable parts. That landing, when it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, we do hear that sonic boom. So many people may have thought, okay, what's going on? Maybe it's a SpaceX launch. And again, there's another look at Sky Witness 9. What we're talking about now happened almost an hour ago, and the smoke is still billowing from the launch pad at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station from a test fire, a static test fire of an unmanned rocket. There are no reports of any injuries. The smoke, what we are being told, is not toxic, not of concern. That comes from Brevard County Emergencies Operations Center Director. So there is some good news in all of this. In terms of a setback, anytime you have an explosion with a space program, the Kennedy Space Center, NASA, or even a private contractor like SpaceX, it's a big deal because it does cause you concern. You ask yourself immediately, if this is the agency, SpaceX, that is racing, and there's a great picture of
of the fireball you see right there.
Just an amazing picture right there.
And just how thick and black that smoke is as well. We were talking about people all over, we're getting calls from people all over Brevard County saying that they either heard it and it was loud, or they felt it. You know, you mentioned the person who said it knocked the sliding glass door off the tracks.
We're going to be getting
tremendous feeling there.
Yeah, some of those eyewitness accounts. We've had folks on the air, but going back to my point, that this is concerning for a lot of reasons. SpaceX could very easily be the contractor that's used to return manned flights from the United States, return us to space. And if SpaceX is having issues, then that's not a good thing. So even though it's a private company and it's not NASA, it's SpaceX, this is something that it will be a cause for concern for scientists as they look and try to figure out what happened. Static test fire, because again, the static test fire was used as a way of tanking those engines and making certain everything was clicking, because it's expensive to lift off, and especially when you're delivering something like Facebook's first satellite or whatever you're delivering. Maybe you're delivering goods to the International Space Station. But there's another live look at the the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in the distance from Sky Witness 9. An explosion happened about 1 hour ago from right now. It was a massive explosion that was heard. Many heard 2 explosions. We have a few eyewitnesses that say they think they heard 3. Could have been the echo, but regardless of that, with such force, Vanessa, that the smoke is still billowing. We saw the balls of flames, and then folks are talking about their house shaking, their windows shaking, their windows rattling, doors coming off the hinges, things coming off the cabinet, and again, people thinking that maybe their home was struck by lightning. And if anyone's been in one of those heavy thunderstorms, you know how that just scares you.
Again, if you were just joining us, we've been on the air now for a little more than half an hour telling you about this explosion at the SpaceX complex. This was what's called a static test fire, so nothing was actually lifting off. The rocket was scheduled to launch Sunday morning, I believe about through Saturday morning, about 3 o'clock. So, but this was not an actual launch. But there you can see, that's a live look now from Sky Witness 9 of this breaking news there, the explosion at the SpaceX complex. Interesting that we haven't heard anything from SpaceX at this point. about exactly what has happened. But important things to note from what we're hearing, no serious injuries in this. And also we had someone from Brevard County Emergency Operations Center saying that there was nothing toxic in here, which of course would be a concern when people see this. And again, we're getting reports from people all over Brevard County saying that they could not only hear what sounded like a sonic boom, because if you've lived in this area, you know, you're used to hearing that anytime you talk about some kind of a launch. So people saying they heard something very loud, sounded like a sonic boom, sounded like explosions. Some people even saying that they heard explosions over several minutes worth of time. And also people who are saying not only did they hear it, but they felt it. They felt things shake, rattle in their homes as well this morning.
The imagery that has been coming in shows you just in terms of what these folks saw and heard in Brevard County this morning within the last hour. NASA says an explosion occurred at the launch site. This is, again, Pad 40. It's at the Kennedy Space Center. But all the different agencies reporting what they saw, what they heard. And this was, 9 engines that take this rocket and its payload, in this instance, the payload being a satellite for Facebook, into space. And again, there's a really good shot provided to us from Skywitness 9, and you can see now that launch pad 40 with the damage done to, again, that pad likely significant and still smoldering at this time. What we have not seen is any shots of emergency responders getting in there, maybe likely just letting this burn itself out before going in. And so that may be the reason that SpaceX at this point is silent. I would imagine that they too are in shock. When you have a setback like this, not only does it hurt financially, but it also hurts the mission of showing that you can do this over and over and over again without a problem. And that's that confidence that all of us would like to see with the agency that's going to take man back into space.
There's that picture again. We showed you this a minute ago, but this will really illustrate what we're talking about, what people say that they could see all over the county, that thick black fireball right there. The smoke is so thick there. And again, we had a photographer in Skywitness 9. We heard from him just a few moments ago talking about once they lifted off from here in Orlando at the Orlando Executive Airport, then they could see that smoke. And people all over Central Florida are saying that not only did they feel something and hear something, but they could see that black smoke as well. Again, there's a live picture from Skywitness 9.
Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX, as I look at his Twitter account, he is very social media savvy. And the most recent one was, the proud announcement that the first stage of a CRS-8 booster landed safely. And then this tweet came from him yesterday. It says, "Thanks for the long-standing," this is interesting when you know what happened today, from Elon Musk. "Thanks for the long-standing faith in SpaceX. We very much look forward to doing this milestone flight with you." And that's regarding this particular milestone flight. So a lot of optimism. And again, is Elon Musk, who is the founder of SpaceX, also Tesla cars, and does a lot of stuff, of course, financially, that has turned him into one of the richest men on the planet. He has a setback today, and his social media account at SpaceX, nothing coming from them, no official word from them in terms of exactly what happened. But an explosion at SpaceX rocks the Brevard County Space Coast and rocks the space industry as well.
All right, now let's go back to Channel 9's Brevard County Bureau Chief Melanie Holt on the scene there. Mel, we heard from you just a moment ago. What can you tell us now about what you've learned in the last few minutes?
I can tell you we're still waiting for word from SpaceX. There's no official word yet. We've basically been told as soon as they have some information to share, they will. But here from Cape Canaveral, obviously outside the gates of the Air Force Station at this point, you can see between the wind and whatever's going on there at Space Launch Complex 40, that smoke is all but dissipated at this point. I've been talking to a veteran space photographer out here, Carlton Bailey. He's worked for Aviation Week and Space Technology, since 1989. He was one of the many people that was getting calls this morning about the explosion that rocked the Space Coast this morning, and folks wondering, what has happened here. Obviously, we know that this was all during some routine testing for a launch that was to happen this weekend. Of course, this being a major setback now. So really the real question for us now is how to recover. We don't know if that payload is gone at this point, the satellite that was supposed to be launched this weekend, a very valuable payload. We don't know about the status of the rocket, but we can imagine that it may not be good at this point. But obviously there may also be some longer term effects there, depending on the condition of the actual launch pad itself. So those are all questions that we're hoping that Elon Musk, SpaceX will be answering later today.
Absolutely, Mel. Of course, SpaceX was a company that jumped in, is competing for that multi-billion-dollar business that would be returning man to space. Their product is the Falcon 9. They've had success. They've had failure. We have video of one of their failures from 2015. We're going to cue that up and play that for you. This is not the first setback that they have had. But again, this aerospace company founded by the founder of PayPal, who also is dealing with some Tesla issues. But on your right, this explosion happened after liftoff, and that's to the right. That's not today, but that happened back in 2015. And as we look at this to your right and to the left, these are the two major setbacks. This we covered as well, and you could tell that there was a failure there. Again, another unmanned flight. This is all part of the testing process, but in this age of video and high-definition cameras, when we see this sort of thing, it stirs up emotions that we have here in Central Florida regarding manned spaceflight that did not go well. So when you see something like this, the ultimate goal here, folks, is not for SpaceX to just deliver Facebook satellites, which is what the plan is or was for Saturday at 3 a.m. The goal for SpaceX is to get in the game of returning NASA astronauts, U.S. astronauts, and others to the International Space Station and beyond, because we know that the funding from the federal government is not what it was, and we know that SpaceX and other companies are competing so that they have a chance to get that contract, a multi-billion-dollar contract. So this is a big setback, and again, the silence is deafening from Elon Musk and SpaceX at this point.
And also, you mentioned his personal Twitter account, also the SpaceX Twitter account, nothing on there. The last time I checked, only thing that was on there was something from August 30th, which would have been Tuesday.
All right, we're going to tell you exactly what we're covering here. As again, I'm with Vanessa Eccles to my right, and we are sitting here this morning 1 hour in. About an hour and 10 minutes ago, we got the first reports of loud explosions from Brevard County residents, and the end result, as we know it now, no reports of significant injuries to anyone that worked on the pad, if any injuries at all. This was a static test fire of the engines as this rocket, SpaceX Falcon 9, gets set for liftoff Saturday at 3 a.m. We don't know if that launch would have happened because of the weather or not, but certainly they were continuing on with their protocol. The pad's still smoldering at this point. This is pad 40, and the people that heard this explosion contacted us and felt as though it was a sonic boom, it was a lightning strike. They didn't know what happened, but they knew that that's not a sound they heard every day. Don Walker from the EOC talked to us just moments ago about should the smoke be of concern to those that are within the sight and smell of what's burning on the launch pad.
There's no threat to the general public from what we understand was a catastrophic abort during a static test fire at the SpaceX launch pad.
Okay, and that is something that certainly would be concerning for people here in this area. Those of us who have been here for a long time have seen, different launches and everything. But again, he's saying no threat to the general public, because when you see that, the first feeling is, what kind of effect this might have environmentally. But again, he's saying no threat there. That was Don Walker from the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center. You talked a bit about what the people, about an hour ago, we started getting calls, and you've seen things on social media, people talking about what they saw. Also, so interesting about what they say they felt, thought it felt like sonic booms, like when the shuttle would return. So people who've been around a while know what that is like. And also some people were saying that they felt like they heard explosions happen over several minutes, not just one, but several, over several minutes. So we don't know exactly what that could have been as well.
As we look at the successes, we're looking right now at a failure by all accounts. A SpaceX test fire did not go well. The achievements for SpaceX are plenty. It includes the first privately funded liquid propellant rocket. And so that was something that they were applauded for. They also were the first privately funded company that launched and orbited and recovered a spacecraft. That happened in 2010. First private company to send a spacecraft, the Dragon, to the ISS. They did that in 2012. the launch of the SES-8 in 2013 and the delivery into geosynchronous orbit was also a big accomplishment. So as we look at these accomplishments, they are many, but the setbacks are at least twice. We have the explosion today, the one in 2015. This one happened during a test fire. The other one happened, of course, after liftoff. Channel 9's Christopher Heath has been on this story since it broke at a little after 9. Chris has been working his sources. And Chris, what new information do you have for us?
Well, right now, you mentioned some of the costs associated with this. About $61 million is the cost to actually put the rocket out there, send it into orbit. And right now, we have established that, SpaceX has been able to bring some of the first stage of the rocket, that's the initial booster, back and land it, saves them a little bit of money, but $61 million. Now, you mentioned that earlier last year we saw a rocket successfully land on a barge, and that was the idea that SpaceX would be able to reuse it. I've gone through a couple of their contracts here because most of them are posted through both federal and international agencies. It does not appear that this rocket that exploded today was the one that actually landed back on the barge last year. This looks like it was one of the other rockets that was essentially going to be used, and they were going to try and recover down the line, but probably not. You talk about also, I mentioned the $61 million cost. It's unknown, and Mel already mentioned this, whether or not the satellite was on board. This is all kind of part and parcel with it, but you look at just the simple fuel cost here. $200,000 is what SpaceX estimates it costs to fill up one of these rockets with the fuel necessary just to break Earth's orbit and send a satellite into space. Going through also some of the information about SpaceX. Typical kind of things you're going to see from a large company that is doing this kind of forward thinking, and that is as far as OSHA violations, safety hazard violations. The company in 2014 had an accident at its McGregor, Texas facility. That's where they do rocket testing. A worker died in that incident. Now, it's important to note in the McGregor incident, that was a worker that was riding on a truck that was transporting some material. He fell off and subsequently died. It was not as a result of a rocket test. And as far as their facility here in Central Florida, what we have seen there is some minor stuff, about a $7,000 fine for not having certain procedures in place, another fine for some other procedures not being in place. Nothing really major here, but OSHA is aware of the company, does have some stuff on file, but really nothing that jumps out and says this is a company that was being poorly run or being, cutting corners from a safety aspect, which would lead into kind of what we saw today, where you pull people back, you have the rocket out on the launch pad. If you're going to do any testing, now's the time to do it, because if something goes wrong, as it appears right now it has, you don't have any employees out there. You don't have anybody out there that's going to get hurt, anybody that's going to have to be evacuated. And so what we're seeing, both for what happened today and looking back at about 3 to 4 years of OSHA files through the federal government, is that, SpaceX, some minor problems along the way, but really nothing major. Greg and Vanessa?
And Chris, I want to bring this up. Maybe you can research it. Maybe you know the answer off the top of your head. But there is funding from the federal government that goes both towards SpaceX and Boeing, as the effort is to get man from the United States, from these soils, back into space, maybe by as early as 2017. This commercial space program money coming from the federal government, I wonder if it will be impacted at all when you have these moments of failure, and if you could talk about that.
Well, what you're talking about there is when the money that the feds are putting into the space program is essentially trying to kind of keep what NASA had already started with this manned space exploration going, and this idea that we're going to a certain extent, outsource some of this to private companies, let them see if they can turn a profit on it, but also let them kind of be that cutting edge of developing the technology, and things like SpaceX has already proven it can do. Now, it did lose 3 to 4 rockets before it successfully landed one, but this idea that you can send a rocket up into space, the first stage of the rocket, which is the part of the rocket that essentially pushes it past Earth's orbit, then comes back down. And it used to be that was not usable anymore. That's something SpaceX has been able to recover. So when you talk about that funding, Greg, what that is trying to keep this program going to a certain extent. I don't want to misuse the word subsidize, but to a certain extent subsidize what is a very costly endeavor, but really kind of keep that science and technology always stepping forward. You would imagine that there's such a demand to get satellites into orbit. There's such a demand to replace old satellites or to, fix problems that are up there, that even after something like what happens today, there will still be a demand both from the private sector and from governments, the United States military, needing to constantly keep satellites up there for both, some of information gathering and just for simple, GPS functions. Greg?
All right, Chris, we'll continue to check back in with you as you work your sources. The one thing to remember, too, is that space is a political football. The funding, whether it's from the Obama administration or others, has been cut in recent years. And so as we look forward to what will happen, the goal of the space program was to get man back into at least ferrying from here up to the space station by 2017. There are members of Congress, Vanessa, that don't like this public-private partnership and are uneasy with it. So when you see something like this, I would imagine that that will be used as they continue to debate whether the funding of these private companies is good business.
And also, another thing, we mentioned the accident that happened in July of 2015. Ever since then, it was kind of like a backlog, so they were really trying to ramp efforts up in order to kind of catch up with doing that. We have a statement from SpaceX. We're going to get to that in just a second, but also want to mention another thing,
and
another
good
story.
Picture right here, too, Vanessa. For the first time, we're seeing it really zoomed in close, and you can see water being dispersed. This is the closest view we have had
so far
to Launch Pad 40. There's the ocean, so you can see it's how the proximity is there, very close. So really, these things blast out over fishes. But as you see right here, there's the damage to the top from this test fire, and then as it pans down to the ground, our photographer there, you can see the smoke still, again, emanating from here an hour and 20 minutes since the explosion, and you see some water as well being applied to that fire. The one thing that is missing here, of course, human beings you don't see there. That's a good thing. So a lot of this would be automatic. Now, maybe beyond the smoke where you see a lot of that water coming from, maybe there are firefighters or something that are shooting water towards those hot spots. But at this point, that's the best view we have had to where that massive explosion happened. It looks like there also is maybe just a little flame still burning there as well. But people heard as many as 3 explosions. We're hearing 2 that just rocked Brevard County this morning about an hour ago.
And there's the issue you see right there, just that lingering smoke. I mentioned that we have that statement from SpaceX. If we can show that right now, it says SpaceX can confirm that in preparation for today's static fire, there was an anomaly on the pad resulting in the loss of the vehicle and its payload. Per standard procedure, the pad was clear and there were no injuries. That is the first time this morning, after this happened a little bit after 9 o'clock, that we have heard anything from SpaceX. But again, that was a statement they're confirming. And then back to this picture now from Skywitness 9. As we said, that's the closest view that we've seen. You can see the water being poured on there. But again, that smoke just lingering. You can understand now why people are saying all over, I was going to say Brevard County, really Central Florida, people are saying they can see that lingering smoke.
Not a good thing. This is not a good day for SpaceX, not a good day for our efforts here in the United States to return man to the International Space Station, the ISS, which is ultimately the goal as early as 2017. Now, the rocket that was supposed to lift off Saturday at 3 a.m. clearly, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to think that that has now been pushed back, if not canceled completely. But as we look at this situation, it's a bigger issue than just an explosion today. And of course, we're following every angle. We have teams of reporters that have fanned out across Brevard County. But the issue here is, what does this do to our space industry? This is a national, international story today. And again, this is not something that you want to see. Now, granted, as we push towards the outer limits, what we want to see is we want to see ourselves, push the limits. And sometimes accidents happen. Let's go to Dale Ketchum, who has been a part of the alliance between NASA and these private companies. And Dale, a longtime voice that we've all heard during space shuttle launches, is on with us now. Dale, thank you for being on with us. I know it's a busy morning. What can you tell us about what happened today, and what are the latest details?
Well, as best we can judge, obviously I defer to SpaceX and their qualification. I think the main thing we were all interested in, make sure no one was hurt, and clearly because it was a static fire where they cleared anyway, for this obvious reason, we're all very fortunate that no one was hurt, and we just lost a payload in a vehicle. Those can be replaced. Obviously, this is very unfortunate. It is a setback for SpaceX, who've been working hard to clear back the manifest that had accumulated a payload. But at the end of the day, getting into space is a difficult business. We've had accidents in the past. We will have accidents in the future. Our job is to just be prepared and respond appropriately. And clearly, the Air Force and their safety team drills for this sort of event on a regular basis because they know it's a possibility. It appears as though when this occurred, everybody went into action, knew what they were doing, and is dealing with it in the proper manner. And we'll just, you keep flying. You learn from, find out what happened, what went wrong. I think this is a big part of why this administration was pushing for 2 different vehicles and systems.
Dale Ketchum, go ahead.
Why they have 2 different systems to provide access, getting Americans back into space so we can stop relying on the Russians. And that way, if you have one failure, you still have another system in place. And that will give us redundancy, which is something we haven't had, because in the past, whether it was, an accident on Apollo that set us back a couple of years, or 2 accidents on Space Shuttle when NASA's had their failures, it grounded the U.S. for years at a time. And the goal is to try to make it so we can, if we have a failure on one system, we've got redundancy.
Dale Ketchum on with us. We talked about how much it costs, $75 million per ride right now. What does this do in the broader spectrum of things? You have the 2 companies, Boeing and SpaceX, competing. Dale, funding is always an issue. This is a public-private partnership. These are setbacks that no one likes to see.
Correct, and space is a tough business. There's a limited amount of federal money, but I think the goal here and what we've been working for aggressively is this is a commercial launch. This will impact, obviously, as it should, revisiting how soon we launch astronauts on these vehicles. But this particular launch was a commercial payload. This is a commercial launch on going off of Air Force property, and the Air Force responded appropriately. But the goal is to get to the future that we're excited about in Florida is an increasing amount of commercial activity, because then you are less reliant on the federal government and the whims of Congress. And our goal is to get to a point of where business is making these decisions, much less so the federal government.
Excellent point. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, thanks Dale Ketchum, the political football, Vanessa, is something that is never fun. We've seen that funding slashed. We've seen it being used in campaigns. And today, this explosion will be played, no doubt, by members of Congress.
I want to mention that we got a statement, very brief, from NASA. It simply says NASA has no direct information related to the incident that occurred shortly after 9 a.m. Thursday at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station at Complex 40, because we were mentioning also heard nothing from Elon Musk. We just now got that statement from SpaceX, but again, that is all we're hearing from NASA right now. Also want to mention that another big story we're following, of course, has to do with the weather. We want to let you know that there's going to be an update at 11 o'clock from the National Hurricane Center about Hermine, so we're going to bring that to you as well. But getting back to this story right now, Cuthbert Langley is live at Spaceview Park in Titusville with an interview with someone who was there about what she saw and heard. Cuthbert, what can you tell us?
Vanessa, we just got here a little while ago, and let me kind of give you some perspective about where we are. As we pan the camera over, you can see across the Indian River there, that is the Kennedy Space Center where this happened earlier today. You can see there really is no smoke, no sign that anything serious happened here. Of course, it was a very different story just a short time ago. We just met this couple here visiting from Colorado. This is Joan Taylor. You guys are staying about 5 miles away from here. Explain what you heard this morning.
Yes, this morning, just doing things around the house, and I thought something fell on the roof. Just heard this loud boom. My husband thought it was lightning, thunder, and I thought, no, it wasn't that. So he looked around the house, didn't see anything, and then next thing you know, we had the news on, and we were really surprised. But we definitely always hear and feel the launches from the house. So, yeah, it's...
And you guys have visited, coming out here several times before. I mean, did this sound different? I mean, what kind of clued you in that this could have been different than just a typical launch?
Well, I hadn't been watching the news, being here on vacation, so I wasn't aware that Saturday it was when they were going to launch the SpaceX. But I don't know. I guess we always hear sounds, it seems like. I mean, I lived here since 68, and so I kind of thought maybe something's going on out there, but I didn't know that it was, a mistake.
Right. And how many explosions did you hear?
Kind of like one that was sort of a two-part thing,
So you heard one and then a couple others afterwards?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. And guys, this is again just across the river where there are several people out here fishing. We're going to continue to talk with them and see what they heard and saw this morning. But for now, we'll go ahead and send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Cuthbert Langley again reporting from the SpaceX launch. He's at Spaceview Park, which is a place, of course, people gather all the time to listen, watch, feel, because you feel these launches as much as anything. So today on this test fire, people felt it, they saw it, and to some, they smelled it. So this was not what we needed to see with, again, the efforts to get man back into space. A huge setback today.
At 10:35 might be a good time now for us to just bring you up to speed if you're just joining us on what's happened here. An explosion this morning shortly after 9 o'clock. What was supposed to be called a routine rocket test there. They call it a static test fire. So there was not an actual launch. The launch itself was supposed to happen Saturday morning about 3 o'clock. So again, that SpaceX launch. We do know that the vehicle and the payload, according to the statement we got from SpaceX just moments ago, both of those were lost. So big concern, of course, would be what kind of danger to the public maybe after something like this happens. We have a statement now from the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center. We've heard from them this morning, and here's what that says. Quote, "We have not recommended any evacuations as there is no threat to the general public." And that would be a concern because of what we've shown you this morning, that very, very thick black smoke in that area that people say that they could not only see from there along the Space Coast, but also here in Orlando as well, just all over Central Florida looking up for that. So again, they're saying no threat to the public from that. This happened at Launch Complex 40, and we don't have any reports of any major injuries too.
There's the good news in all of this. Let's take another look. Sky Witness 9 again to the right of our screen, and that's a great view of the actual launch pad. Let's go over to Severe Weather Center 9, and meteorologist Brian Shields has been monitoring the smoke and also monitoring what else we're being impacted with, and that could be a tropical system here in the next day or so.
Yeah, exactly. We're watching that tropical system off to the west of us. That will move into North Florida. And we'll see some bands of rain later today. So I want to bring you down. I zoomed down here into Brevard County over toward Cape Canaveral to show you what's going on as we go throughout the day. And you see the time frame top right-hand corner of your screen. And as we advance forward, there's going to be a better chance of some of the very outer bands from Hermine kind of clipping us by. So this is 3 o'clock. So for any investigations going on what went wrong over there as they were doing that testing, there is that chance of rain. They'll see on and off rain there. You may get a break, and you can see that chance of some heavier storms again. And then for tonight, gradually settling down, although that breeze is going to stick around. Now, Melanie Holt was talking about the winds, and we were able to pick up the smoke on the radar earlier. You see on this loop, it was right there. Now we're just getting a couple sprinkles moving in, but we could see that smoke on the radar. And this is Mosquito Lagoon up here, the Atlantic here. So a lot of that smoke was drifting over water, which is good. But the winds are picking up right now. We're going to have some of the gusts over 20. Right now at about 10 to 20 with some higher gusts. So we'll keep an eye on that. But any of the diminishing smoke should generally be going over the open water.
That's good. And the other thing I think we're looking forward to, Brian, is maybe some rain, which would help tamp out that smoke and also tamp out that remaining plume of black smoke. And we saw a little bit of, as we zoomed in a little bit earlier, we saw what appeared to be something still burning there, and the melting of that. Again, there's 9 engines here. This is a huge rocket that, again, is capable of lifting man into, in this instance, it was going to be a satellite, but it has been to the International Space Station. But 9 engines, those Merlin 1D engines. We've seen explosions in the past. One in particular was SpaceX. Boeing is the other company. We talked about this public-private partnership in essence. $6.8 billion was the funding that came to this from the federal government. So taxpayers are concerned. This is a loss. This is a setback with the efforts to return man to space by 2017. And let me read this little quote here. This is important. Each company, this is part of this partnership, must show it can successfully complete a test flight with 1 astronaut aboard before moving on to between 2 and 6 more flights contracted by NASA. Right now, we are paying the Russians $68 million every time we send 1 astronaut to the International Space Station. That gets pricey, and that can add up in a hurry. Not to mention what Dale said. I think what Dale Ketchum said was important, and this is why it's important to all of us. If we want to keep Brevard County vibrant, We need to have the ability to fly rockets commercially to deliver, as you mentioned earlier, satellites, so that we're not relying on just NASA, so that this can be a vibrant business for Brevard County, because obviously good business is good business for all of us.
And he talked about the risk involved, saying that that's just part of the process of what we're trying to do here to along the Space Coast. Bureau Chief Melanie Holt a moment ago talked about talking to someone there who has been around for a while, a photographer, Carlton Bailey. He talks a little bit about what we've mentioned this morning, what he heard and what he felt. So let's listen to that sound from him.
Hearing the reports of how it was shaking houses and sounding like just car bombs going off, and yeah, it's inherently dangerous, and that's why they keep people away from it.
Absolutely.
We're also hearing from the Kennedy Space Center as well. There's that view that we mentioned a moment ago, very close, and you can see still the smoke and still see trying to put water on that as well. Let's show that statement from the Kennedy Space Center if we can as well, and you can hear what we just got from them just moments ago, if we can show that. It says, quote, Kennedy Space Center Emergency Operations Center personnel are monitoring the situation and are standing by to assist if required. Kennedy Environmental Health is monitoring the air quality to ensure it is safe for employees.
Again, to recap, about an hour and a half ago, we had a major explosion during a static test firing of the Merlin engines as the Falcon 9, the SpaceX rocket, which was supposed to lift off on Saturday morning at 3, had some sort of catastrophic problem. The explosion was felt and heard and seen by many, many thousands of people in the Brevard County area. And again, as we talked to Dale Ketchum, who's Chief of Strategic Alliances, basically he works with that public-private partnership and has been a part of NASA and the space program for decades, says that we have to keep flying. What happened, what went wrong is something that they'll have to figure out. The good news in terms of the greater picture, of course, we don't have any reports of anyone injured, Vanessa, is that Boeing is still competing for that as well. So while SpaceX has had this explosion, also one in 2015 in flight, there is another agency, and that's why there was a double bid that went out, so it wasn't all reliant on one company. And so that's what we saw here. So in terms of the efforts and the goal of returning man to the ISS, lifting off from flights here in Brevard County, that goal of 2017 as we know it today still stands, but there's a look at the damage.
Also want to mention that
that
SpaceX is saying that both the vehicle and the payload were both lost. That payload, $200 million, because we were talking about the kind of money involved in this. We also, as
that's
we take
big news. Facebook was had given a lot of money. This was their first satellite going up. Mark Zuckerberg had spent a lot of money to get this satellite to give other members of the world who currently don't have that ability for internet, that ability. So this is a setback for people around the world. They will feel this impact.
And again, they were saying that the vehicle and the payload were both lost. So we're talking about millions here. When we showed you that statement from the Kennedy Space Center a moment ago, they were saying that they were monitoring air quality. We just want to point out again that from what we're being told from Brevard County Emergency Operations, that there's no threat to the public there, that apparently that is not an air quality issue. They are monitoring it, of course, but they don't believe that there's anything with that. When you see and hear what happened, that might be a concern, of course, you know, for people like, oh, what's this going to do environmentally toward us? We have a picture from Twitter from someone who sent anchor Martha Segowski with a look at that. That says they're just a couple of miles away from Complex 40 where this happened. And you can see right there what we've been talking about this morning, thick black smoke. And look closely toward the right on that picture there, and it looks like you can see some of the flames as well that were happening around the time when this picture was taken.
Absolutely. The one thing to remember when you have a test firing, and I guess it bears repeating, that they don't have those engines separate from the rocket. So when we said that the engines exploded during a test firing, all that's already attached. They don't have a test firing and then the rocket and the payload. It was all one. And of course, all that is lost with this massive explosion. Let's go back to Channel 9's Christopher Heath, who has been working his sources to get more information on all that was lost in this explosion, rocket, engines, and payload. Chris?
Yeah, we already established about $61 million just for a Falcon 9 rocket launch. That's the cost of the rocket, the cost of the fuel, the cost of just getting it up into space. Actual cost of the company is about 40% less than that. So you're looking at about right around $30 to $35 million just for pure, raw material there. And something I want to jump back to that you guys have been talking about a lot, and that is this idea of really accelerating returning man to space and not having to rely on the Russians for that. You mentioned 2 contracts out there. There's obviously the contract with SpaceX. The contract that we've gotten from the federal government shows that at a $2.6 billion contract for what's known as the Crew Dragon space capsule. There's also a $4.2 billion contract with Boeing. That's for their CST-100. Both of those competing. Now, of course, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin has announced that it is trying to get into this as well. They're looking at about a 2018 timeframe. But getting to the Crew Dragon is the capsule that will actually take American astronauts into space on a SpaceX flight. That was supposed to happen next year sometime. And if you look at some of the statements that SpaceX has put out in the last several years, the president of SpaceX, Gwen Shotwell, actually said earlier this year that the plan was to have 50 Falcon 9 launches under their belt, have 50 of these taken care of before they start to really put men into space. Now, they've taken some of these Crew Dragon, is what the pod is actually known as, and put it on these rockets and worked on trying to send those up, but unmanned. The idea is that they want to kind of take some baby steps here and really kind of move this forward gradually so that what eventually you are able to do is launch astronauts directly from Cape Canaveral back into space, back to the International Space Station. And ultimately, you know, if you read what some of the different releases that you've had come out from SpaceX, the mission ultimately is to get to Mars and explore other planets in our solar system. But right now, you know, this is the contracts that are out there. $2.6 billion to SpaceX and another $4.2 billion to Boeing, both with the goal of eventually getting man back into space. And getting back to the satellite that was lost, this is the Facebook satellite. This goes back to April of this year, when Facebook announced that it was going to be putting the satellite into orbit. This is kind of a new step forward for them. It is a deal with a company named SES. The idea was basically this would give Facebook kind of its own standing platform and expand its reach beyond just kind of what is established already as really its footprint on the globe, being, of course, Europe, parts of Asia, and, of course, North America. This idea was that it was going to give Facebook that kind of leg up. And what we've heard from SpaceX today is that the payload was lost, which would mean they'd already loaded the satellite on board and the satellite was lost. Trying to track down exactly the cost for that might be proprietary and harder to come across. But right now, if you just take the pure numbers for what was lost today and just say raw materials, nothing else, no damage to the pad, you're looking at about a $35 to $40 million loss just in the simple machinery, the simple equipment, and the fuel that was all essentially destroyed in one single blast. Greg?
Absolutely. A 2-stage rocket that, when you look at the website, thank you, Chris, it says that the goal with everything developed, the first time that everything's developed in the 21st century was to develop a reliable rocket. And so far, there have been 2 major miscues, and you can see the damage left behind.
And important to point out, if people are wondering like why this is such a big deal, when you talk about these government contracts and just the millions and millions of dollars and what it means for the Space Coast, that's why it's such an issue today and in the long term as well. But again, no reports of any serious injuries, and from what we're hearing, no kind of environmental threat, despite what we're seeing, that thick black smoke, which you can still see around Central Florida. Channel 9's Melanie Holt, Brevard County Bureau Chief, has been on the scene there for about close to 2 hours now, Mel, what can you tell us now that you've learned about what happened?
Well, Chris was just talking about the cost, of this explosion. We've seen some rough estimates for that Israeli satellite, that payload of $200 million. Of course, you have to add to that the cost, of course, of the Falcon 9 rocket that was also lost. We've been out here, as you said, for quite some time now, just watching the scene, which you can see, and that smoke, if you've been watching over the past hour or so, has all but dissipated. It appears to be almost gone at this point. I've been out here as well speaking with veteran space photographer Carlton Bailey. He's with Aviation Week and Space Technology, and he told me he just, in his many years, does not recall a failure like this one on the launch pad itself.
I have never seen anything that was anywhere this close to the pad. The closest to an on-pad explosion, I believe, was the Delta back in 97, where it was about 1,300 feet over the pad and when it exploded, and that was as close to an on-pad that I've seen. When you see that close to a pad, then you know something major has gone wrong, and your first instinct is, I hope it's not the rocket. It was maybe just a fuel tank and the rocket was saved. But the closer you got, you can tell.
And of course, now we know it was the rocket and its payload. The question that SpaceX has yet to answer today, and they may still be evaluating that at this point, is the condition of the launch pad itself, because of course that may be a major factor as they try to regroup. So we'll need to keep checking back with SpaceX today to see the overall condition of the launch complex.
And it's been pushed back to 2018. We don't know what today will do, but again, just to reiterate, it costs $70 million per seat to fly on a Russian Soyuz rocket. So the goal to get a United States astronaut on a United States mission is huge and important just for the costs.
And Carlton mentioned that Delta II rocket, comparing it to that was in 1997. I remember because I was reporting then. That satellite was $40 million, and that was an actual liftoff, and after like 10 to 15 seconds is when that exploded. It's interesting that he mentioned that.
Good look here. Space Center has been rocked today, the entire Space Coast, and there is a zoomed-in shot from Sky Witness 9. It shows you what Melanie Holt was just talking about, Vanessa, that Launch Pad 40 likely sustained significant damage, and you can see that it has. And the thing that I keep looking for are remnants of the Delta rocket, of the SpaceX rocket, and I see no indication that there are any large pieces of it even left. When you talk about something being demolished, that is it. I don't see big pieces of the spacecraft, of the payload, of the engines, nothing. Just nothing but smoke and flames and rubble.
And then when you look, if you look now toward the middle of the screen, a little bit to the left, you can see some flames still.
Still burning. When you have 9 engines, these are 9 Merlin engines. And there's another good look. This is, again, from one of the YouTube videos that we have found of people that were, because remember, when they do one of these test firings, it's a dress rehearsal. And the dress rehearsal is basically just going through all of your checkpoints, getting ready for that Saturday 3 a.m. liftoff, and making certain that all things fire. Then you shut it down, then you refuel. And so when this happened, people are there. They want to hear, they want to feel and hear what it's like for those engines to all be fired, 9 Merlin engines. And as you can see, this is the result when something goes wrong. And as again, one of those space observers said, Vanessa, that he can't recall in all of his years of taking pictures something happening on the launch pad. And this happened today.
That's when he mentioned the Delta II closest thing. We've talked a lot this morning about what people heard and felt, because it's so dramatic to hear that. We've seen things on social media. Cuthbert Langley had a chance to talk to someone who was fishing at Space View Park, and let's listen to what that person had to say.
This is just a vibration. It's another vibration, like a small earthquake. That's a lot of power out there, man. It's a lot of money. It just went up in smoke.
That says it all right.
It is a lot of power out there, and he said a lot of money went up in smoke.
When we talk about just how much it moved the earth, people had things fall off of shelves. They had doors come off, sliding glass doors come off hinges. People felt like their house was struck by lightning. Windows shook. When you have an explosion this close, again, talking with those who know, we're waiting for more details. This may very well be, Vanessa, the biggest explosion that we have ever felt in Central Florida. And it may have happened today with this explosion happening on Earth and shaking the Earth. As that gentleman just said, it felt like an earthquake.
But again, not just people who were, close by. But all over Central Florida, people were saying that they felt something. And then again, some of the people saying it felt like the explosions, there were several that lasted for several minutes.
When you have all those engines blowing up, and this is also a two-stage rocket, there's a lot of propellant there. I mean, this, as I said, is a test rehearsal. It is fully loaded for bear, and then the engines are shut off right before it were to lift off. In this case, we saw the explosion happen. This was just as though you were going to launch the rocket. You have all your team in place. You have all your employees in place. You are going through your checklist. And then right before it lifts off, everything's shut off. It does not lift off. And then you refuel, recheck, check all of your engines, check all of your functions. And then on Saturday morning, if everything went well this morning, on this Thursday morning, then you'd be good to go. And this is
supposed to happen at 3 o'clock Saturday morning, in fact. Again, they call it a routine test fire. You were just seeing some pictures there that really illustrate everything we've been talking about after that explosion this thick black smoke that people, even here in downtown Orlando, were saying they could just look up and see it and was wondering what in the world had happened.
Imagine the teams over there. This is manned by the United States Air Force. This is a United States Air Force complex. And so just moments ago, I received handed to me, this comes from the 45th Space Wing Public Affairs Office. And I'll read this, Vanessa. It says at approximately 9:07 a.m. this morning, an explosion occurred at Launch Complex 40 on Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Initial reports indicated that there were no casualties and has been no threat to public safety. CCAFS Emergency Management providing the initial on-scene response. Roadblocks will be set up in and around CCAFS, so we ask that you avoid the entrance to the Air Force Station until further notice. We will provide updates as they become available. This just handed to me and just sent out within the last 20 minutes or so, and that's the latest there. And when we were interviewing folks from over in that particular area, Dale Ketchum said that they practice for this, and the Air Force is, it's a commercial launch on Air Force property, and they were ready. He also said that the future in Florida is commercial activity, not reliant on the government and Congress and the whims of the folks in Washington. So this is a big setback because you have Facebook putting all of this money into this satellite. Facebook is obviously a wealthy company. Other companies are saying, okay, wait a minute, maybe this is not the way that I want to deliver my payload into outer space. Other countries do this as well, Vanessa. This is a big deal. We want to see Brevard County remain vibrant. And of course, the vibrancy of that has been tied to the space program. Well, the space shuttle stopped flying several years ago, and this was our next venture. We need to regain confidence from around the world that we are the place to come to send your payloads into space, because so many people's lives in terms of their livelihoods depend on it.
And again, they really have been trying to play catch up, if lack of a better way to put it, since that explosion in July of 2015. Trying to catch up and trying to get ahead in all of this. SpaceX did issue a statement that we showed you, I guess about maybe 20 minutes ago, but it said that SpaceX can confirm that in preparation for today's standard pre-launch static fire test, which was supposed to be a routine test, there was what they call an anomaly on the pad, resulting in the loss of the vehicle and its payload. So when we talk about the amount of money that is involved here, again, the loss of the vehicle and the loss of the payload, the satellite. It's
significant. It is now 10:57, so this happened at 9:07. We are just a few minutes away, less than 3 minutes from hearing from meteorologist Brian Shields. I know a lot of you folks will be curious as to what's happening with our tropical storm. We're going to give you the very latest at 11 o'clock. The new coordinates, the new briefing is coming out on that, so we're also staying on top of that as well.
And we have a statement that we want to show you as well. I think this might be from Senator Bill Nelson, if we can show that. And while we're trying to get that ready, it said, today's incident reminds us that all spaceflight is an inherently risky business. As we continue to push the frontiers of space, there will be both triumphs and setbacks. So that is a statement from U.S. Senator Bill Nelson of Florida.
Today, the latter of those, a setback. The good news here is that there was not a loss of life. His statement continues.
The end of his statement there. But at the end of the day, I'm confident our commercial space industry will be very successful. So he's speaking to two of the issues that we're talking about this morning, and that is the business aspect of this, also this whole issue of the government and private partnership, and also what we heard, I think it was Dale Ketchum said, it's risky business, but it's the kind of thing where we're pushed to take risks.
Need to keep flying, and then to try, in terms of the importance to have Bill Nelson, and for those who have been around, of course, he's our senator. He also has flown on a space shuttle. He was a citizen that flew, got the training and flew, and so he is a huge proponent in Washington for that partnership that is now at $6.8 billion. That is written from the United States government to both Boeing and SpaceX. So millions lost today, but this is bigger than just that. This is all about the confidence in Washington, the confidence around the world, and the ability for Central Florida to be a part of that commercial industry that can send various industries, satellites into space successfully, because what is lost here, Elon Musk can afford it. This gentleman is the PayPal founder. He is a billionaire. Of course, he's got his hands full with Tesla and some lawsuits there on the self-driving car, and now this loss financially hurts, but in the bigger picture, of course, it hurts with that confidence level and trying to figure out what happened and making certain it does not happen again.
Now, we talked a little bit about Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. For the people who are in that area, we understand that there are some roadblocks going up in that area as well around Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. So if that is part of what you are doing here for your daily activities, you need to know that information. Right now, I think if we can go over to certified meteorologist Brian Shields, because in addition to this, we also have another immediate story that we're following here, and that is the latest on what's happening with Tropical Storm Hermine. We're going to get an update from the National Hurricane Center right about now.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to get an update on that. Again, close to home. We're in good shape right now. Just a couple light showers that have been around as expected. Again, we don't expect an all-day rain event or anything like this. We're also watching over toward Cape Canaveral, the space complex. Some light showers, drizzle possible. Winds are starting to pull out of the south there. But as we widen out the view, we can show you really what's going on with this system and with Hermine itself back to the west. And this is going to make landfall close to Tallahassee, Apalachicola by the time we get into tonight. But we're going to watch some of these outer bands as this gets closer to land up here later this evening and tonight. Some of these outer bands are going to start to find us, and in those we could see some isolated severe weather. So that is something we're going to be on the lookout for sure. Now, as we take a look over toward Cape Canaveral, as far as any rain goes, it looks like this afternoon will be the best chance. Again, we're pretty quiet outside now, but as we stop the clock, right around 3-4 o'clock, spotty showers and storms around over in Brevard County, and you see a few rounds of those, and we have to watch out for the possibility of severe weather. Winds right now pulling out of the south as we get into Brevard County. That was drifting the smoke up to the north over Mosquito Lagoon and the Atlantic, but again, that smoke has greatly diminished, and we'll keep you posted on that.
All right, now it is 11:01. Since shortly after 9 o'clock, we've been following this story of what happened shortly after 9 o'clock along the Space Coast, an explosion of the SpaceX rocket there during what was supposed to be a routine test firing. This was all in preparation for the satellite that was supposed to launch Saturday morning shortly after 3 o'clock.
So this is a dress rehearsal that did not go well. The major explosion felt by folks that are both in proximity, not too far from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and also we're getting reports that they felt this at the Parish Medical Center. They felt the vibration as though, like we heard the fisherman mention, as though it was an earthquake, and that's all the way in Titusville. So we have heard of windows rattling, things being knocked off shelves, sliding glass doors being knocked off of their guides, all because of this massive explosion. And then the reverberation also felt throughout the world, and our space industry is even greater maybe than that. No injuries reported. That's the good news.
And no environmental danger from what we've been able to tell so far as well.
Right. So that story is still unfolding. We're still working on what happened, why it happened, what is next because of this, and we're pulling together all of those resources, and we're going to have a full report just ahead.
And then we'll see you for Eyewitness News at noon as well.
That's right. Let's take us back to the scene. One final look live from the NASA camera shows the smoke still billowing from an explosion that happened 2 hours ago. Again, the all clear for residents. There are no safety concerns. We'll pull together all of this information for you and have a complete report on Eyewitness News at noon. For now, take care.